I hereby rule to strip the father of all custody rights, Judge Harlan boomed. At the plaintiff's table, my daughter-in-law Mallory turned around. She didn't look at my crying son. She looked directly at me, and she smirked. It was a cold, victorious smile that said, "I won. You'll never see your granddaughter again." The judge raised the gavel. For the safety of the child, sole custody is granted to... Bam! The courtroom doors didn't just open. They slammed against the wall. "Wait!" a small voice screamed, cracking with fear. "Grandpa Judge, wait!" The smirk vanished from Mallory's face instantly. Standing in the doorway was my 8-year-old granddaughter, Layla. Her school uniform was torn. Her hair was a mess. And in her trembling hands, she wasn't holding a toy. She was holding an old, cracked iPhone with a shattered screen. Mallory stood up, knocking her chair over. "Get her out of here. Don't let her speak." But Layla ran past the bailiff, holding the phone up like a weapon. "Mommy told me not to show this," Layla cried, her small fingers fumbling with the black cord dangling from the court monitor. She tried to jam the plug in, but her hands were shaking too hard. "Bailiff, stop her!" Mallory screamed, lunging forward. "Sit down," Judge Harlan roared, his voice shaking the walls. He looked at the trembling child, then at the frozen clerk. "Clerk, assist the child. Connect that device now." Welcome to my channel. Every day I share life stories that touch the heart, challenge the mind, and remind us we're not alone. If you enjoy stories that stay with you long after they end, I'd truly appreciate it if you subscribed and liked this video. Your support means more than you know. Now, let's dive back into today's story. And trust me, if you stay with me until the end, you'll feel every moment. I couldn't breathe. My chest felt like someone had tightened a tourniquet around it. Layla wasn't supposed to be here. She was supposed to be at school, miles away from this ugliness. Seeing her here, looking so small and frightened, triggered a primitive alarm in my brain. I was a nurse for 40 years. I know what trauma looks like. And Layla had that look. Mallory froze, but her eyes were darting around the room like a trapped rat. She looked at me again. The smirk was gone. In its place was a promise she had whispered to me months ago in my own kitchen. "I'll make sure his old hag of a mother never sees Layla again." That was the threat. That was the weapon she held over our heads. If we fought back, she would erase us from Layla's life. And looking at Judge Harlan's angry face, I realized we were seconds away from that threat becoming a legal reality. Tell me in the comments, have you ever had that specific fear? The terror that someone could use the legal system to rip your grandchild out of your arms forever? If you are a grandmother watching this, I know you understand that distinct, cold pain. If you're still not subscribing, tell me in the comments. What's holding you back from joining our community? "Grandpa Judge," Layla said again, watching the clerk connect the wire. "Mommy told me not to show this." She looked at her mother, then at the screen flickering to life. But Mommy is lying. To understand why a sweet 8-year-old girl would defy her mother in a court of law, you have to understand the hell she had been living in. You have to understand the shadow my son had become. And to do that, we have to go back 6 months, before the lawyers, before the courtroom, back to when the silence first started. Have you ever walked into a home that felt like a prison? Not because there were bars on the windows, but because the air was so thick with tension you were afraid to exhale? That was my son's house in June. I had driven over to drop off a casserole. It was a Tuesday. Derek's car was in the driveway, which was odd for 2 p.m. He was a senior architect. He lived on job sites. I let myself in with my key. The house was spotless, not clean, sterile. It smelled like bleach and lemon pledge, sharp enough to sting my nose. "Derek," I called out. "In here, Mom," he whispered. I found him in the kitchen. He was on his hands and knees, scrubbing the grout between the floor tiles with a toothbrush. He was wearing his suit pants, but his shirt was soaked with sweat. "Derek, what are you doing?" I asked, setting the casserole down. He flinched, The sound of the glass dish hitting the granite counter made him jump like a gunshot. "Shh," he hissed, looking toward the ceiling. "Mallory is napping. She has a migraine." My son, 6'2", broad-shouldered, the man who used to carry Layla on his shoulders for miles, looked terrified. He looked like a ghost haunting his own life. "Derek, you're the breadwinner," I said softly. "Why are you scrubbing floors on a Tuesday?" "She says I don't do enough," he mumbled, not meeting my eyes. "She says if the house isn't perfect, I don't care about our family." Just then, footsteps thudded on the stairs. Mallory appeared. She didn't look like someone with a migraine. She looked impeccable. Fresh makeup, hair perfectly blown out, wearing yoga pants that cost more than my weekly grocery bill. "Ilara," she said. Her voice was sugary sweet, but her eyes were cold. "I didn't know we had guests. Derek, you missed a spot near the fridge." Derek scrambled to the fridge, scrubbing harder. "I brought dinner," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Mallory wrinkled her nose. "Casserole? Heavy on the carbs, isn't it? Derek is on a strict diet. I need him to stay fit if he wants to keep up with me." She walked past him, stepping over his hands as if he were a piece of furniture. She didn't say thank you. She didn't offer me water. She just opened the fridge, took out a sparkling water, and sighed loudly. "You're pouring it wrong," she snapped at Derek, who had stood up to get a glass. "I'm sorry," Derek whispered. "You're always sorry," she muttered, taking a sip. "Honestly, Ilara, I don't know how you raised him. He's so clumsy." My blood boiled, but I saw Derek's face. He was pleading with me silently. "Don't say anything, please." So I swallowed my rage. I didn't know then that this was just the surface. I didn't know about the bruises she claimed were accidents. I didn't know about the man who was already living in my son's house, right under his nose. That evening, things got stranger. We were sitting in the living room. Derek was folding laundry, Mallory's laundry, while she scrolled on her phone. Layla was in her room, studying, Mallory claimed. The front door opened without a knock. A man walked in. He was tall, muscular, wearing a tight tank top that showed off gym-sculpted arms. He had a key. "Hey, babe," the man said. I froze. He wasn't talking to Derek. Mallory looked up and smiled, a real smile, not the fake one she gave me. "Hey, Brett, you're early." Derek stood up, clutching a silk blouse to his chest. He looked small next to this man. "Who is this?" I asked, my voice sharp. "This is Brett," Mallory said casually. "My personal trainer and emotional support coach." "He has a key?" I asked. "He needs access for our sessions," Mallory said, waving her hand dismissively. "Derek knows. Right, Derek?" Derek looked at the floor. "Yeah, it's fine." It wasn't fine. Brett didn't act like an employee. He walked into the kitchen, opened the fridge, and grabbed a beer. Hiss crack. The sound was loud in the quiet room. He took a long swig, leaning against the counter, staring at Derek with a look that wasn't friendly. It was predatory. "Rough day at the office, buddy?" Brett asked Derek, a smirk playing on his lips. Derek didn't answer. He just kept folding laundry. "Ilara, stop staring," Mallory snapped. "You're being rude. Brett is practically family. He helps me deal with the stress." She looked pointedly at Derek when she said, "stress." My nurse's instinct was screaming. This wasn't a trainer. This was a territorial display. This man was marking his territory, and my son was being pushed out of his own pack. But I had no proof, just a bad feeling in my gut and the sight of my son shrinking into nothingness. Remember, Brett, the so-called trainer who walked in like he owned the place, wasn't just passing through. He was the first crack in the dam. The first sign that my son's marriage wasn't just failing, it was being dismantled from the inside out. A few weeks later, on the 4th of July, the financial rot started to show. We decided to go out for pizza, a simple family outing. Derek, Layla, and me. Mallory had a migraine again and stayed home. Probably with Brett, I thought, bitterly. We went to a nice spot in Buckhead. Layla was happy eating her cheese slice. giggling as Derek made silly faces with pepperoni. For a moment, he looked like my son again. The shadows lifted. Then the check came. Derek pulled out his debit card. It was a heavy platinum card. He handed it to the waiter with a smile. 5 minutes later, the waiter returned. He looked awkward. He leaned down, whispering so the other tables wouldn't hear. "Sir, I'm sorry, the card was declined." Derek frowned. "That's impossible. Try it again. It's probably a chip error." The waiter went back. He returned a minute later, shaking his head. "Declined again, sir. Code 51, insufficient funds." Derek went pale. "Insufficient funds? There should be thousands in that checking account. My direct deposit hit on the first." He pulled out his phone, his fingers trembling as he opened the banking app. I watched his face fall. It wasn't just confusion, it was horror. "What is it?" I asked. "It's low," Derek stammered. "It's really low." "How low?" "Double digits," he whispered. "Derek, you're a senior architect," I hissed. "Where did your paycheck go?" "Mallory handles the finances," he said, his voice sounding hollow. "She said I kept messing up the bill payments. She said she put it in a high-yield savings account for Layla's college." Layla looked up from her pizza, sauce on her chin. "Mommy says we're poor now," she said innocently. "That's why she fired the cleaning lady, but she bought a new purse yesterday." Imagine a father, a man who works 60 hours a week designing skyscrapers, sitting in a pizza parlor unable to buy his daughter a $10 meal, while his wife buys designer bags with his sweat equity. Can you feel the humiliation burning in your chest? I could feel it radiating off him. I paid for the pizza. Derek didn't say a word the whole ride home. He just stared out the window, gripping his phone, checking the balance over and over again, praying for a glitch that wasn't there. August brought the silence. I called the house to schedule a pickup for Layla. We had a standing date. Saturdays were grandma days. We baked cookies, we watched old movies, we just were. Mallory answered the phone on the second ring. "Hello?" Her voice was sharp, impatient. "Hi, Mallory, I'm coming to get Layla for—" "No," she interrupted. "Excuse me? Layla isn't coming today. She doesn't want to see you." My grip tightened on the receiver. "Let me talk to her." "She's busy," Mallory said coldly. "She has dance practice and then tutoring. She's falling behind in math, Alara, probably because she spends too much time eating sugar at your house." "Layla is at the top of her class in math," I argued. "Mallory, put her on the phone." "I'm her mother," Mallory snapped. "I decide what's best for her, and spending time with a toxic enabler isn't best." Toxic enabler. The words were so rehearsed. They sounded like they came from a lawyer or a bad therapy blog. Then, in the background, I heard it. A small, muffled sob. "Grandma?" It was Layla. She sounded far away, like she was behind a closed door. "Layla," I shouted. "I'm here, honey." "Grandma, please." Click. The line went dead. The dial tone hummed in my ear, a flat, monotonous sound of rejection. I called back. Straight to voicemail. I called Derek's cell. Voicemail. I sat in my living room, the silence of my empty house pressing in on me. The cookies I had baked were cooling on the counter, smelling of cinnamon and love that had nowhere to go. I knew then. This wasn't just a bad marriage. This was a siege. She was building walls, cutting lines of communication, starving the enemy, us, before the final attack. Late August. The summer heat in Atlanta was oppressive, heavy with humidity and impending storms. I was sitting on my porch, cleaning the charging port of an old iPhone 8. It was my old phone. I had given it to Layla the previous Christmas, hidden inside a pair of socks so Mallory wouldn't check. "For emergencies," I had whispered to her. "If you ever feel scared, you turn this on. It doesn't have service, but it connects to Wi-Fi. You can call me on WhatsApp." I hadn't heard from her on it in months. I prayed she hadn't lost it, or worse, that Mallory hadn't found it. My own phone buzzed on the table. It was a text from Derek. Just 5 words. "It's over. She served me." I stared at the screen. The words blurred as tears pricked my eyes. Not tears of sadness. Derek needed to leave that woman. Tears of fear. Because I knew Mallory, I knew Brett, and I knew they wouldn't just let him walk away. They would burn everything down to the ground to keep what they had stolen. I put the cleaning cloth down. The worry that had been gnawing at my stomach for months hardened into something else, something cold and sharp, steel. They thought Derek was weak. They thought I was just an old woman who baked cookies. They were about to find out that a grandmother's love is the most dangerous force on earth. Because when you threaten a woman's cub, you don't get mercy. You get war. The next day, the war arrived at my doorstep in a trash bag. The war didn't start with a scream. It started with a plastic trash bag rustling in the wind. It was September 3rd, a Tuesday evening. The air was cooling down, but the humidity still clung to the Atlanta pavement. I opened my front door to find Derek standing on the porch. He held a black, hefty bag in one hand. He wasn't wearing his usual crisp architect's suit. He was wearing wrinkled gym shorts and a t-shirt that smelled like old sweat. "Derek?" I asked, my hand flying to my mouth. "What happened? Is it Layla?" "She changed the locks, Mom," he whispered. His voice sounded like it was coming through broken glass. "I went home after work. My key didn't turn." He dropped the bag. It hit the porch with a dull, heavy thud. "She threw this out the second-floor window," he said, staring at his boots. "She said if I tried to come in, she'd call the police. She said I was trespassing." "Trespassing?" I grabbed his arm. "It's your house. Your name is on the deed." "Not anymore," he choked out. He pulled a thick envelope from his back pocket. "A process server handed me this in the driveway." I took the papers. They were heavy. The header was bold and terrifying. Petition for dissolution of marriage. But it was the paragraph below that made my knees weak. Plaintiff requests immediate temporary custody due to defendant's history of domestic volatility and financial coercion. "Financial coercion?" I read aloud. "Derek, you pay for everything. You bought her a Range Rover last Christmas." "She says I control the money to abuse her," Derek said. Tears finally spilled over, tracking through the grime on his face. "She says she's afraid for her life, Mom. She got a restraining order." A restraining order? Those two words turn a father into a criminal before he even steps into a courtroom. It strips a man of his home, his bed, and his child with a single signature. No trial, no questions. Just a rubber stamp and a sheriff's deputy. I pulled my son inside. He collapsed onto my sofa, the same sofa where he used to watch cartoons. He curled up, shaking violently. "We need a lawyer," I said, my voice hardening. "Tonight." "I can't," Derek sobbed into his hands. "I tried, Mom, on the way here. I tried to transfer the retainer fee. And it's gone." I dragged my laptop to the kitchen table. "Log in," I ordered. Derek's fingers trembled as he typed his password for the joint bank account. He hit enter. The little loading circle spun for an agonizing 3 seconds. Then the dashboard appeared. I gasped. The sound was involuntary, a sharp intake of air that hurt my lungs. Imagine seeing a number that represents 15 years of 60-hour work weeks, a number that is supposed to be 6 figures. Now imagine watching it blink, dissolve, and turn into a single, round digit, $0. "Check the savings," I said, pointing at the screen. Derek clicked. "Joint savings, $0. "The college fund," I whispered. "Check Layla's fund." "Custodial account, $0. "Oh my God," Derek moaned. He leaned back, the color draining from his face until he looked gray. "She took it all, every cent." "Click the transaction history," I commanded. I needed to see the wound. I needed to see the blood trail. Derek scrolled down. The screen was a sea of red text. AUG 28, withdrawal, $9,500. AUG 29, transfer to external act, Core 4490, $15,000. AUG 30, Venmo, cash out, $4,000. Who is she sending this to? I asked, squinting at the screen. Then I saw it. A recurring memo on the smaller transfers. Consulting fees. B training. B training, I muttered. Brett, the trainer. Remember Brett, my daughter-in-law's emotional support coach from the 4th of July? The man who drank my son's beer and stared him down in his own kitchen? He wasn't just drinking beer. He was drinking my son's life savings, sip by sip. She emptied the accounts 5 days before serving me, Derek said, his voice dull. That's why she was so nice last week. She was keeping me distracted while the transfers cleared. I slammed the laptop shut. She wants a fight? She's got one. I have my retirement fund. It's not much, but it's enough to hire a shark. Derek looked at me, his eyes red and hopeless. Mom, she has the money. She has the house. She has Layla. What do we have? We have the truth, I said, and we have me. We didn't get a shark. We couldn't afford one. Sharks in Atlanta charge $500 an hour just to breathe your air. We got Mr. Thorne. His office was on the second floor of a strip mall in Sandy Springs, wedged between a nail salon and a vape shop. The carpet smelled of old coffee and dust. Stacks of files were piled on his desk like leaning towers of Pisa. Mr. Thorne was a small man with messy gray hair and a stain on his tie. But when he looked at Derek's file, his eyes were sharp, intelligent. It's a classic blitz, Thorne said, tossing the papers onto his desk. She hit you with the ex parte order. That means she got the judge to sign it without you being there. She claimed it was an emergency. How is it an emergency? I asked, gripping my checkbook. Derek has never touched her. She doesn't need to prove he touched him, Thorne sighed. He pulled out a document. She just needs a narrative, and she has one. He slid a paper across the desk. It was a sworn affidavit. Dr. Brett Harrison, holistic health practitioner, attests that Mrs. Vance has exhibited signs of severe cortisol stress due to spousal aggression. Dr. Brett? I scoffed. He's a gym trainer. He's not a doctor. To the court, a title is a title until we prove otherwise, Thorne said. Right now, she has a professional corroborating her story. We have nothing. I wrote the check. $5,000. It was a chunk of my nest egg, but I didn't hesitate. Mr. Thorne, I said, handing him the check. How do we fight this? We need to destroy her credibility, Thorne said, leaning forward. We need proof that she's lying. Not just he said she said. We need hard evidence, texts, photos, witnesses. She blocked me, Derek said. She blocked my mom. I can't even ask her for proof. Then we dig, Thorne said. Discovery starts tomorrow. Let's see what pictures she gave the judge. 2 weeks later, we were back in Thorne's office. The air conditioning was broken, and the room was stifling. Thorne looked grim. We got her disclosure, Thorne said. He opened a manila folder. It's visual. He laid 3 photos on the desk. The first was a picture of Mallory, specifically her upper arm. There was a large, purple bruise blooming on her bicep. Remember Mallory, my daughter-in-law, the woman who smirked at me in court? She'd been playing the victim for months. Now she had the battle scars to prove it. Derek gasped. I didn't do that. I swear to God, Mom, I never grabbed her. I believe you, I said, squeezing his hand. Show me the next one. The second photo was of their hallway. There was a hole in the drywall roughly the size of a fist. It was punched right next to a framed wedding photo. The symbolism was brutal. I know that hole, Derek said, pointing. I came home in July and it was there. She told me the movers did it when they brought in the new Peloton. Did you report it to the movers? Thorne asked. No, Derek shook his head. She said she handled it. She said they gave us a discount. There was no discount, Thorne said quietly. I checked the bank records, and there were no movers that week. How do you defend yourself against a crime that never happened? When the evidence is right there, a hole, a bruise. But the story behind it is a lie? It's like trying to catch smoke with your bare hands. She made the hole, I realized, my voice cold. She punched the wall herself, or she used a hammer. We know that, Thorne said. But to Judge Harland? He sees a bruised woman and a punched wall. It fits the profile of a violent husband. And the third photo? I asked. Thorne hesitated. He flipped the last picture over. It was Layla. She was sitting in a corner, hugging her knees. She wasn't crying, but her eyes were wide, terrified. The caption says, "Child seeking refuge during father's outburst," Thorne read. Derek put his head on the desk and groaned. That was during a thunderstorm. She's scared of thunder. She hides in that corner every time it storms. Mallory took a picture of her fear and pinned it on me. I felt a fire ignite in my chest. This wasn't just lying, this was evil. She was using my granddaughter's innocence as a weapon. She's meticulous, Thorne admitted. She's been planning this since June, maybe earlier. She's not doing this alone, I said. Mallory isn't this smart. She's vain, but she's not strategic. Someone is coaching her. Brett, Derek whispered. We need to know who he really is, I said. Thorne, can we track him? Private investigators cost money you don't have, Thorne said gently. But if you happen to see something public, that would be helpful. I became the investigator. It was October 15th, a Tuesday night. The air was crisp now, leaves skittering across the road. I parked my sedan 3 houses down from my son's home, her home now. I turned off the engine and reclined the seat. I had my binoculars. Bird-watching binoculars I usually use to spot cardinals in my backyard. Tonight I was hunting a vulture. The house was lit up like a Christmas tree. I could see shadows moving in the kitchen. At 9:00 p.m., a black Jeep Wrangler pulled into the driveway. It was Brett. He didn't knock. He didn't ring the bell. He used a remote to open the garage door and drove right in. He lives there, I whispered to the empty car. He's not a visitor. He's a resident. 10 minutes later, the garage door opened again. Brett walked out to get the mail. He was wearing pajama pants and a t-shirt. He looked comfortable. He looked like the man of the house. I raised my binoculars. I adjusted the focus wheel until his image was sharp. He was holding a stack of envelopes. He flipped through them, tossed the junk mail into the bin, and turned back toward the house. As he reached for the door handle, the porch light caught his wrist. Something glinted, gold and silver. I gasped. I dialed the focus tighter. It was a watch, a heavy 2-tone Rolex Submariner with a distinctive blue bezel. My heart hammered against my ribs. I knew that watch. I remembered the weight of it in my hand. I remembered the day I bought it, a celebration gift for Derek when he passed his licensing exams. I remembered the engraving on the back, "Build your dreams." Derek had lost that watch in August. He had torn the house apart looking for it. Mallory had scolded him for being irresponsible. She said he probably left it at a job site. But there it was, on Brett's wrist. The trainer wasn't just sleeping in my son's house. He was wearing my son's achievements. He was wearing my son's hard work like a trophy. I snapped a picture with my phone through the windshield, but I knew it was too dark. The glare would ruin it. I needed to see it closer, but I couldn't risk it. I lowered the binoculars. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from rage. This confirmed everything. This wasn't just a divorce, it was a heist. Armed with my anger, I tried to see Layla. It was October 30th. Halloween was the next day. I had Layla's costume, a Wonder Woman outfit she had begged for in July, sitting in my back seat. I pulled into the pickup line at her elementary school. I just wanted to give it to her. I just wanted to see her face. I reached the front of the line. The school secretary, Mrs. Gable, was standing there with her clipboard. I had known Mrs. Gable for 3 years. I usually brought her peppermint bark at Christmas. I rolled down the window. "Hi, Susan. I'm here for Layla Vance." Mrs. Gable didn't smile. She pulled the clipboard tight against her chest. She looked uncomfortable. "Mrs. Vance," she said stiffly, "you're not on the list." "What do you mean?" I asked, forcing a smile. "I'm always on the list. I'm her grandmother." "The list was updated yesterday," Mrs. Gable said. She glanced over her shoulder. "By the custodial parent. Only Mrs. Mallory Vance is authorized for pickup. Susan, please. I begged, my voice cracking. I just want to give her a costume. It's Halloween. I can't, Mrs. Gable whispered. There's a court order note in the file. It says you're a flight risk. A flight risk, I shouted. I'm 64 years old. Where am I going to fly to? Honking started behind me. Parents were getting impatient. You have to leave, Mrs. Gable said, her voice hard now, or I have to call the resource officer. Then I saw it. In the lane next to me, the passing lane, a Range Rover glided by. Mallory was driving. She was wearing dark sunglasses. In the back seat, I saw a flash of pigtails. Layla! I waved frantically. Layla! Layla! Layla turned her head. For a second, our eyes locked. Her face was pressed against the glass. She looked sad. Mallory didn't even turn her head. She just stepped on the gas. The car surged forward, leaving me choking on exhaust fumes and heartbreak. It wasn't just a car driving away. It was the system working exactly as she planned it. The school, the bank, the courts, they were all weapons she had pointed at us. And she had her finger on the trigger. I sat there as the honking got louder. I gripped the steering wheel until my arthritic fingers burned. They had taken his money. They had taken his home. They had taken his reputation. And now they had built a wall around his child. But walls have cracks, and if I had to use a sledgehammer to find one, I would. Mr. Thorne had warned us that without hard proof, we would lose. Well, I had seen the watch. I knew the proof existed. I just had to find where they were hiding it. And I prayed that the little cracked iPhone I gave Layla was still charged. We thought the investigation was the hard part. We thought finding the watch, the fake hole in the wall, and the secret boyfriend would be enough. We were wrong. It was November 1st, 11 days before our court date. The phone rang in Thorne's office. It was a clerk from the courthouse. She filed a motion, Thorne said, hanging up the phone slowly. He looked older than he had last week. His tie was loose and the bags under his eyes were dark purple. What kind of motion? I asked. Emergency relief, Thorne said. She wants to amend the temporary order. He handed me a faxed document. The paper was still warm. Motion to suspend grandparental access due to toxic interference. Toxic interference? I repeated, my voice rising. I bought Layla's Halloween costume. I pay for her dance lessons. How am I toxic? Read paragraph 4, Thorne said quietly. I looked down. The paternal grandmother, Alara Vance, has actively enabled the defendant's aggression. She has harassed the plaintiff at school pickup and fundraised money to defend an abuser. Fundraised? I sputtered. I used my own retirement savings. To her, that's funding an abuser, Thorne said. Alara, if the judge grants this, you won't just be banned from school pickup. You'll be barred from contact completely. No calls, no visits. If you send her a birthday card, you could be held in contempt. Being labeled toxic for protecting your child is a special kind of hell. If you've ever been slandered by someone you welcomed into your family, subscribe now. We are fighting back. My hands shook as I held the paper. It wasn't just a legal document. It was an eviction notice from my granddaughter's life. She's scared, I said, trying to steady my voice. She saw me at the school. She knows I'm watching. This is a defensive move. It's an offensive move, Thorne corrected. And it's working. The hearing is set for the main trial date, November 12th. Everything rides on that day. The legal attack was bad enough, but Mallory wasn't satisfied with just the courts. She wanted to destroy us in the court of public opinion, too. It happened on a Tuesday 4 days later. I was at the Kroger on Piedmont Road, buying milk and eggs. I turned down the baking aisle and nearly bumped into Mrs. Gable. Not the school secretary, but Janet Gable from my church choir. Janet and I had sung alto together for 10 years. We had exchanged Christmas cards. Janet, I smiled, relieved to see a friendly face. How are you? I haven't seen you at practice. Janet didn't smile. She pulled her cart back sharply as if my presence might contaminate her produce. Oh, she said. Her voice was tight. "Hello, Alara. Is everything okay?" I asked, stepping forward. Janet took a step back. "I'm surprised to see you out, honestly. After what happened." "What happened?" "With Mallory," Janet whispered, looking around. "We're all praying for her, you know. Broken ribs take so long to heal." I dropped my carton of eggs. They hit the linoleum with a wet crunch. Yellow yolk began to pool around my sneakers. "Broken ribs," I whispered. "Janet, who told you she has broken ribs?" "It's all over the prayer chain," Janet said, her eyes wide with judgment. "Mallory asked for healing prayers. She said she said he snapped." The heat rose in my cheeks so fast it made me dizzy. It started at my neck and burned all the way to my hairline. It was the heat of pure, unadulterated shame. Not for what I did, but for the lie standing in front of me. "She is lying," I said, my voice shaking. "Derek never touched her. There are no broken ribs." "There are photos, Alara," Janet said coldly. "She showed the pastor. Maybe you should spend less time defending him and more time praying for his soul." She pushed her cart past me, the wheels squeaking through the puddle of broken eggs. I stood there, surrounded by the smell of raw yolk and betrayal. She wasn't just isolating Layla. She was isolating us from God. She was poisoning the water until we had nowhere left to drink. By Sunday night, November 10th, the pressure broke my son. I was in the kitchen boiling water for tea. The house was quiet, too quiet. Derek had been staying in his old room for 2 months now, but tonight he was pacing the living room like a caged tiger. "I can't do it, Mom," he said suddenly. I turned off the stove. "Can't do what?" "I can't go to trial," he said. He stopped pacing and leaned against the doorframe. He looked gaunt. His shirt hung loose on his frame. "I'm going to call her lawyer. I'll take the deal." "What deal?" "I'll give her the house," Derek said, his voice flat. "I'll give her the 401k. I'll sign over the equity. I just want 50% custody. If I give her the money, maybe she'll let me be a dad." I slammed my mug onto the counter. Hot water splashed onto my hand, but I didn't feel it. "Are you insane?" I shouted. "I'm tired, Mom," Derek yelled back. "I'm tired of people looking at me like I'm a monster. Janet Gable spit on my car yesterday. I just want it to stop." "Listen to me," I said, walking over to him. I grabbed his shoulders. He was trembling. "Remember Mallory. The woman who punched a hole in her own wall to frame him? The woman who faked broken ribs to the church choir? Do you really think money is enough for her?" "She doesn't want the house, Derek," I hissed. "She wants to destroy you. If you plead out, you are admitting guilt. You are telling the world you abused her." "She promised she would drop the restraining order," Derek whispered. "She is a liar." I shook him. "She won't give you 50% custody. She wants you in jail. If you sign that paper, you are signing your own warrant. You will never see Layla again without supervision." The realization hit him like a physical blow. He wasn't negotiating a divorce settlement. He was negotiating his freedom. The stakes weren't assets anymore. They were prison bars. Derek slid down the doorframe until he was sitting on the floor. He put his head in his hands and wept. Not the quiet crying of September. This was the loud, ugly sobbing of a man who realizes he is trapped. I sat down next to him and held him, just like I did when he was 5 years old and scraped his knee. But I couldn't kiss this boo-boo better. The day before the trial, November 11th, we met Mr. Thorne one last time. The mood in the office was funeral. Thorne had all our evidence spread out on his desk, the photo of the hole, the bank statements showing the transfers to Brett, the blurry photo I took of the watch on Brett's wrist. He looked at it all and sighed. "It's circumstantial," Thorne said. He took off his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. "Alara, I believe you. I know she's lying. I know Brett is living there. But the law doesn't care what we know." "We have the bank transfers," I argued. "She stole his money." "She'll say it was for marital expenses," Thorne said. She'll say she paid Brett for security because she was afraid of Derek, and the judge will buy it because he sees the bruise photo. The bruise is fake, Derek shouted. Can you prove it? Thorne asked sharply. Do you have a video of her applying makeup? Do you have a witness who saw her do it? Silence filled the room. We didn't. Judge Harland is old school, Thorne continued, his voice softer now. He sees a crying mother, a frightened child, and a hole in the wall. He defaults to protection. Unless we have a smoking gun, we are walking into a slaughter. Have you ever known the truth deep in your bones but had absolutely no way to prove it? Have you ever screamed into the void, knowing the void was going to swallow you whole? That is the specific agony of the falsely accused. So we're going to lose, Derek whispered. We have a 10% chance, Thorne said honestly, if I can rattle Brett on the stand, if I can catch him in a lie. But he's slick. He's been coached. I looked at the pile of papers, all our work, all our investigation. It amounted to a hill of beans against a professional liar. I went home that night feeling heavier than I ever had in my life. It was 11 p.m. The house was dark. The only light came from the street lamp outside, casting long skeletal shadows across my bedroom floor. I sat on the edge of my bed holding my phone. I opened my contacts. I scrolled down to L. Layla Emergency. It was the number for the cracked iPhone 8, the one hidden in the sock drawer. Or maybe it was in the trash now. Maybe Mallory had found it months ago and smashed it. I typed a message. My thumbs felt clumsy. I love you, Bean. Be brave. Grandma is fighting for you. I hesitated. Was it dangerous to send it? If Mallory had the phone, she would use this text as proof of toxic interference. She would show the judge. But if Layla had it, if she was scared, she needed to know she wasn't alone. I hit send. I watched the screen, holding my breath. Sending, delivered. I gasped. It didn't turn green, sent as text. It turned blue, iMessage. That meant the phone was on. It was connected to Wi-Fi. Layla had it. I waited for the 3 little dots. I waited for a reply, a emoji, a hi grandma. Minutes ticked by. 5, 10, 20. The screen stayed blank. She wasn't answering. Was she asleep? Was she too scared to type? Or was Mallory standing over her reading the message and smiling because I had just handed her the final nail for my coffin? I put the phone on my nightstand. I didn't sleep. I lay there staring at the ceiling, praying to my late husband. Help us, Robert. If you have any pull up there, use it now. The morning of November 12th dawned gray and cold. We drove to the courthouse in silence. Derek was wearing his best suit, but he looked like a man walking to the gallows. I held his hand in the back seat. His palm was cold and sweaty. We walked up the massive stone steps of the Fulton County Courthouse. The building loomed over us, a fortress of judgment. The sound of our footsteps echoed off the stone walls. Click, clack, click, clack. It sounded like a countdown clock. Near the metal detectors, we saw them, Mallory and Brett. They were standing near the elevators. Brett was wearing a suit that was too tight in the arms. He was laughing at something Mallory said. He looked confident, arrogant. Mallory was checking her makeup in a compact mirror. She looked perfect. Then she saw us. In a split second, the laughter vanished. Her posture slumped. Her face fell into a mask of tragic suffering. She grabbed Brett's arm as if she needed support to stand. Don't react, Thorne hissed in my ear. Whatever she does, whatever she says, do not react. If you get angry, you prove her point. We walked past them. Mallory flinched away from Derek as if he were radioactive. You got this, babe, I heard Brett whisper to her. Showtime. We got into the elevator. The doors closed, sealing us in. This is it, Derek whispered. I squeezed his hand. I wanted to tell him it would be okay. I wanted to tell him justice would prevail, but I couldn't lie to my son. We were walking into the lion's den, and we were fresh meat. The courtroom was freezing, but Mallory's performance was hot enough to scorch the earth. She sat on the witness stand, dabbing at her eyes with a lace handkerchief. Her voice trembled perfectly on cue, thin, brittle, the sound of a woman pushed to her limit. "I tried to make it work, Your Honor," Mallory whispered into the microphone. "I really did. I knew Derek had a temper. His mother, she's very controlling, and I think he learned it from her." I dug my nails into my palms. She was weaving my name into her lies now. "Can you tell the court about the incident on July 15th? Her lawyer asked gently. Mallory shuddered. She took a sip of water, her hand shaking just enough to look authentic. "We were arguing about money," she said. "Derek was furious that I bought organic groceries for Layla. He started screaming. He got in my face. I could smell the rage on him." Derek flinched beside me. He hadn't raised his voice in 10 years. "And then?" the lawyer prodded. "He swung," Mallory sobbed. I ducked. His fist went right into the wall, right next to my head. If I hadn't moved... She trailed off, leaving the implication hanging in the air like smoke. Judge Harlan leaned forward. His face was grave. He wasn't looking at Mallory with skepticism. He was looking at her with pity. "That hole in the wall," Mallory whispered. "Every time I walk past it, I feel like I'm going to throw up. I had to cover it with a picture so Layla wouldn't ask why Daddy broke the house." Have you ever watched someone lie about you with such conviction that for a split second you almost questioned your own memory? That is the power of a narcissist. If you want to see her exposed, subscribe now. "I just want to be safe," Mallory finished, looking directly at the judge. "I just want my daughter to be safe." She stepped down from the stand. As she walked past our table, her sobbing stopped for a fraction of a second. She didn't look at Derek. She didn't look at me. She just smoothed her skirt, the picture of elegant suffering. Then came the hammer. "The plaintiff calls Brett Harrison to the stand," her lawyer announced. "Remember, Brett. The man wearing my son's stolen Rolex, the man living in my son's house. Now he was walking up the aisle to swear an oath on a Bible he clearly had never read. He was wearing a navy suit that was a size too small, straining across his chest. He sat down and smiled at the judge, a charming, confident smile. "State your name and occupation," the bailiff said. "Brett Harrison," he said, his voice deep and smooth. "I'm a holistic health practitioner and personal trainer." "Mr. Harrison," Mallory's lawyer began, "how do you know the plaintiff?" "I've been training Mrs. Vance for 6 months," Brett said, "helping her with stress management." "And were you present in the home on the evening of July 15th? "I was," Brett nodded gravely. "I was there for a late session, stretching and meditation." "What did you see?" Brett turned to look at Derek. His eyes were flat, devoid of empathy. It was the look of a predator watching a wounded deer. "I heard yelling," Brett said. "I ran into the hallway. I saw Mr. Vance shove Mallory, hard. She hit the wall, then he punched the drywall right next to her face. He was screaming that he would kill her if she spent another dime." "Liar!" Derek shouted, standing up. "I wasn't even home. I was at the office." "Sit down, Mr. Vance," Judge Harlan barked, slamming his gavel. "One more outburst and I will hold you in contempt." Derek sank back into his chair. He was shaking so hard the table vibrated. Thorne stood up for cross-examination. This was our only shot. "Mr. Harrison," Thorne said, buttoning his jacket, "you say you are a trainer. Do you often conduct sessions at 10:01 p.m.? "My clients have busy schedules," Brett shrugged. "Do you live at the residence, Mr. Harrison?" "Objection," Mallory's lawyer shouted. "Relevance?" "It goes to credibility, Your Honor," Thorne argued. "Overruled," the judge said. "Answer the question." "I do not live there," Brett lied smoothly. "I sometimes stay late if Mrs. Vance is afraid for her safety. I sleep in the guest room, to protect her." "To protect her," Thorne repeated skeptically. "And the Rolex watch you were seen wearing on October 15th? The one that matches the description of Mr. Vance's missing property? Brett didn't flinch. It's a fake. A knockoff I bought online. I like nice things. Can't afford the real deal on a trainer's salary. He smiled at the jury box, except there was no jury, just Judge Harland, who nodded, seemingly satisfied with the explanation. Thorne sat down. He looked defeated. He whispered to me, "He's good. He's very good." The next 10 minutes moved like molasses in winter. The lawyers gave closing arguments. Mallory's lawyer painted Derek as a ticking time bomb. Thorne tried to paint Mallory as a manipulator, but without proof. His words were just wind. Judge Harlan cleared his papers. He adjusted his glasses. He looked at Derek with a mixture of disappointment and stern judgment. "Mr. Vance," the judge said. His voice echoed in the high ceilings. "The testimony I have heard today is disturbing. Domestic violence is a cancer in our society, and your conduct, terrorizing your wife, frightening your child, is appalling." Derek put his head in his hands. He made a sound, a low keening noise of pure despair. "I have no choice," the judge continued. "For the safety of the child, I am stripping you of custodial rights. Visitation is suspended pending a psychiatric evaluation. Full custody is granted to—" Bam! The courtroom doors didn't just open, they slammed against the wall. "Wait!" a small voice screamed, cracking with fear. "Grandpa, Judge, wait!" The smirk vanished from Mallory's face instantly. Standing in the doorway was my 8-year-old granddaughter, Layla. Her school uniform was torn, her hair was a mess, and in her trembling hands, she wasn't holding a toy. She was holding an old, cracked iPhone with a shattered screen. Mallory stood up, knocking her chair over. "Get her out of here! Don't let her speak!" But Layla ran past the bailiff, holding the phone up like a weapon. "Mommy told me not to show this," Layla cried, her small fingers fumbling with the black cord dangling from the court monitor. She tried to jam the plug in, but her hands were shaking too hard. "Bailiff, stop her!" Mallory screamed, lunging forward. "Sit down," Judge Harlan roared, his voice shaking the walls. He looked at the trembling child, then at the frozen clerk. "Clerk, assist the child. Connect that device. Now." I couldn't breathe. My chest felt like someone had tightened a tourniquet around it. Layla wasn't supposed to be here. She was supposed to be at school, miles away from this ugliness. Seeing her here, looking so small and frightened, triggered a primitive alarm in my brain. I was a nurse for 40 years. I know what trauma looks like. And Layla had that look. Mallory froze, but her eyes were darting around the room like a trapped rat. She looked at me again. The smirk was gone. In its place was a promise she had whispered to me months ago in my own kitchen. "I'll make sure his old hag of a mother never sees Layla again." That was the threat. That was the weapon she held over our heads. If we fought back, she would erase us from Layla's life. And looking at Judge Harlan's angry face, I realized we were seconds away from that threat becoming a legal reality. "Grandpa Judge," Layla said again, watching the clerk connect the wire. "Mommy told me not to show this." She looked at her mother, then at the screen flickering to life. "But Mommy is lying." Mallory's lawyer jumped up. "Your Honor, this is highly irregular. A minor cannot introduce evidence. This is a violation of procedure." Judge Harlan stared at the lawyer until the man sat back down. "This is a custody hearing, counselor. My primary concern is the welfare of that child. And if that child ran 10 miles to show me something, I am going to watch it." He looked at the clerk. "Play it." The clerk typed something on his keyboard. The large monitor on the wall, the one used for displaying evidence, flickered from black to gray. The video was shaky. It was filmed from a low angle, obscured slightly by what looked like a vase of flowers. It was the kitchen island. My son's kitchen island. "It's August 10th, I whispered to Thorne, seeing the timestamp in the corner. That was during the discovery phase. On the screen, 2 figures walked into the frame, Mallory and Brett. They weren't fighting. They weren't stressed. They were laughing. Brett had his arm around Mallory's waist, pulling her close. "Are you sure this will work, babe?" Brett asked on the video. His voice was clear. "He's so pathetic," Mallory laughed. She reached for a bottle of wine on the counter, an expensive bottle Derek had saved for their anniversary. "He thinks I'm actually scared. I transferred the last $50,000 to your Cayman account today. We'll be in Tulum by Christmas." A gasp ripped through the courtroom. It wasn't just me. It was the court reporter, the bailiff, even the clerk. The truth doesn't just come out. Sometimes it explodes. If you are waiting for the hammer to drop, subscribe now. You won't believe what happens next. Thorne grabbed my arm. "Did you hear that? Cayman account. That's the smoking gun." On the witness stand, Brett's face went white. He looked at the door, measuring the distance. Brett started to rise from his chair, inching toward the exit. But the bailiff, a large man with crossed arms, took one step to the left, blocking the path. Brett sank back down, trapped. "Wait," Judge Harlan commanded, his eyes glued to the screen. "Keep watching." The video continued. Mallory walked over to a drawer. She pulled out a hammer. Derek made a choking sound beside me. On screen, Mallory walked to the hallway, the same hallway from the photo. She stood in front of the wedding picture. "Ready?" she asked Brett, giggling. "Do it," Brett said, holding up his phone to record her. Crack. Mallory swung the hammer. It punched through the drywall with a sickening crunch. Dust puffed into the air. "Perfect," Mallory said, inspecting the hole. She tossed the hammer onto the counter. Then she opened a small black case, a theatrical makeup kit. "Make the bruise look purple, babe," she said, extending her arm to Brett. "Make it look fresh. The judge needs to feel sorry for me." The courtroom was so silent you could hear the hum of the air conditioning. Judge Harlan's face was turning a dangerous shade of red. The veins in his neck were bulging. He looked from the screen to Mallory, who was now sobbing into her hands. Real tears this time. "It's a deep fake," Mallory screamed suddenly. "It's AI. He made it with AI." "Silence," the judge roared. The video wasn't done. On screen, Brett was dabbing purple and yellow makeup onto Mallory's arm. "What about the old lady?" Brett asked. "Ilara. She's sniffing around." Mallory laughed, a cruel, high-pitched sound that made my skin crawl. "Don't worry about the old hag," Mallory sneered. "Once I get full custody, she'll never see this brat again. I'll tell the court she's toxic. I'll get a restraining order against her, too. She can rot in that empty house alone." The video ended. The screen went black. I sat there, tears streaming down my face. Not because of the insult. I didn't care what she called me. But because the truth was finally out. The poison she had been injecting into our lives was visible for everyone to see. Layla was standing in the center of the room, looking small and brave. She looked at me. "I hid the phone under my mattress, Grandma," she whispered, "because you said the truth is a shield." Judge Harlan stood up. He didn't look like a judge anymore. He looked like an avenging angel. He picked up his gavel. He didn't just tap it. He slammed it down with enough force to crack the wood. Bang. "Bailiff," the judge said, his voice terrifyingly calm. "Lock those doors." The heavy oak doors clicked shut. The sound echoed like a prison cell closing. "Mr. Harrison," the judge said, pointing a finger at Brett, "you just committed perjury in my courtroom. You lied under oath. You conspired to commit fraud. And you are wearing a watch that I strongly suspect belongs to the defendant." Brett tried to speak, but no words came out. He just opened and closed his mouth like a fish. The judge turned to Mallory. She was shaking her head, whispering, "No, no, no," over and over again. "Mrs. Vance," the judge said, "I have sat on this bench for 20 years. I have seen bad marriages. I have seen angry spouses. But I have never seen a calculated, malicious dismantling of a family like this." He picked up the file, Mallory's petition, and threw it onto the floor. "You used this court as a weapon," the judge spat. "You used your daughter as a pawn. You fabricated evidence. You stole marital assets, and you attempted to frame an innocent man for domestic violence. It's not real, Mallory shrieked, standing up. My daughter is lying. She hates me. She's been brainwashed. That video was not brainwashing, the judge snapped. That was a confession. He turned to the bailiffs. Take them into custody, the judge ordered, immediately. On what charges, Your Honor? The bailiff asked, pulling out his handcuffs. Perjury, the judge listed, counting on his fingers. Fraud, filing a false police report, grand larceny, and conspiracy. He looked at Derek. And Mr. Vance? Derek looked up, his eyes wet. I am vacating the previous order, the judge said gently. The divorce is granted on grounds of adultery and extreme cruelty. Full legal and physical custody of the minor child, Layla Vance, is awarded to the father, Derek Vance, effective immediately. Derek burst into tears. He slumped forward, burying his face in his arms. Furthermore, the judge continued, glaring at Mallory, all assets currently held by Mrs. Vance and Mr. Harrison are frozen. A forensic accountant will be appointed to recover the stolen funds, and the marital home is awarded 100% to Mr. Vance as restitution for the fraud. Click, click. The sound of handcuffs ratcheting tight cut through the room. Mallory screamed as the bailiff pulled her arms behind her back. You can't do this. I'm the mother. You can't take my child. You forfeited that title the moment you picked up that hammer, the judge said coldly. Brett wasn't screaming. He was crying. She made me do it, he wailed, pointing at Mallory with his cuffed hands. It was her idea. I just wanted the money. Shut up, Brett, Mallory yelled. You coward. They were dragged out of the courtroom, screaming at each other, their alliance crumbling the moment the consequences arrived. As they passed our table, Mallory lunged toward me. The bailiff jerked her back, but she was close enough that I could smell her expensive perfume, the scent of deceit. You old witch, she hissed. You ruined everything. I didn't flinch. I stood up. I looked her in the eye, the same way she had looked at me when she smirked an hour ago. I didn't ruin anything, Mallory, I said calmly. I just raised my granddaughter to know the difference between a lie and the truth. She was hauled away, kicking and screaming, through the back doors. The silence that followed was heavy, but it wasn't oppressive anymore. It was the silence of a storm passing. Layla ran to Derek. He fell to his knees and wrapped his arms around her, burying his face in her messy hair. I got you, he sobbed. I got you, baby. I'm never letting go. I saved you, Daddy, Layla whispered. I used the shield. I watched them, my two loves, safe at last. The knot in my chest, the tourniquet that had been tightening for 6 months, finally loosened. Judge Harlan stepped down from the bench. He walked over to Layla. He looked giant next to her, but his face was kind. Young lady, the judge said, you did a very brave thing today. You saved this court from making a terrible mistake. Layla looked up at him. Can I go home with Grandma now? The judge smiled. Yes, you can go home. He looked at me. Mrs. Vance, I apologize for the distress this court caused your family. You are free to go. We walked out of the courthouse. The sun was shining. It was blindingly bright after the dim courtroom. We had walked in as victims. We were walking out as survivors. The bailiffs hauled Mallory to her feet. The sound of her weeping had changed. It wasn't the practiced, pretty crying she had used on the witness stand. It was the ugly, jagged sobbing of a woman who had lost control. The courtroom cleared a path. They marched her down the center aisle. She had to pass right by our table. I stood in front of Layla, blocking her view. I didn't want her to see her mother in handcuffs, but Derek didn't look away. He stood up. He straightened his tie. For the first time in 6 months, he stood at his full height. He wasn't the ghost-scrubbing grout with a toothbrush anymore. He was a father protecting his pack. Mallory slowed as she reached him. She strained against the bailiff's grip. You think you won, she spat, her voice raw with hate. You're nothing without me, Derek. You're pathetic." Derek looked her in the eye. His face was calm. "I'm free," he said simply, "and I'm a father. That's everything." "You ruined my life," she screamed, lunging forward until the chains on her wrists snapped taut. "I made you." "No," Derek said, his voice steady as a rock. "You almost broke me, but you didn't." He reached down and picked up Layla. He held her tight against his chest. "You just showed my daughter who you really are," Derek whispered, "and you saved us." 6 months ago, I watched this man shrink into the shadows of his own kitchen. I watched him apologize for existing. Today, standing in that aisle, the shadow was gone. In its place was the man I had raised. The bailiffs dragged Mallory through the double doors. Her screams echoed in the hallway for a moment, then faded into silence. Brett was led out next. He didn't say a word. He kept his head down, staring at the floor, crying silently over the Rolex he would never wear again. "It's over," Thorne said, closing his briefcase with a satisfying click. "Let's get out of here." We walked out into the November sun. It felt different on my skin. It felt cleaner. 3 days later, on November 15th, we gathered in Thorne's office. The mood was electric. Thorne actually had a stain-free tie on. He pushed a stack of papers across the desk toward Derek. "The final judgment just came through," Thorne said, tapping the document. "It's better than I expected." "Did she get bail?" I asked. "Bail was denied," Thorne said. "Because of the flight risk mentioned in the video, the Cayman account, the judge remanded both of them. They are sitting in Fulton County Jail until trial." Derek let out a long breath. "And the house?" "Yours," Thorne smiled. 100%. The judge ruled that since Mallory used the home equity line to fund her fraud, her share of the asset is forfeited. The deed will be transferred to your name by Monday." "What about the money she stole?" Derek asked. "The savings? Layla's college fund?" "The forensic accountant is already working on it," Thorne said. "We froze Brett's accounts this morning. He has a significant amount of liquid cash. We will recover about 80% of what was taken." 80% is better than 0, I said. "And there's one more thing," Thorne said. He pulled out a separate sheet. "The judge issued a permanent restraining order, not just for Derek and Layla, but for you too, Alara." I blinked. "For me?" "Because of the threat in the video," Thorne nodded. "Calling you a hag and planning to isolate you. Judge Harlan wanted to make sure she never comes near you again." I felt a weight lift off my shoulders that I didn't know I was carrying. The fear of that woman showing up on my porch, screaming and banging on the door, vanished. There is nothing quite as satisfying as watching a bully face the consequences of their own actions. Justice is rare, but when it hits hard. If you are cheering for this victory, subscribe now. "So we're safe," Derek said, signing the last paper. "You're safe," Thorne confirmed. "Go home, Derek. Go be a dad." We walked out to the parking lot. Derek stopped by my car. "Mom," he said. His voice was thick with emotion. "Thank you for the lawyer, for the stakeout, for not giving up on me." I patted his cheek. "I'm your mother. I'd fight the devil for you." "You kind of did," he laughed. It was a rusty sound, but it was real. The real closure didn't happen in a lawyer's office. It happened on a swing set. It was November 20th, a Wednesday afternoon. The air was crisp, smelling of fallen leaves and wood smoke. I took Layla to Chastain Park. It was our first Grandma Day since the summer. She ran to the swings, her pink coat flashing against the gray sky. I pushed her, listening to the rhythmic squeak-squeak of the chains. "Higher, Grandma," she squealed. I pushed harder. Her giggles floated on the wind. After a while, she slowed down. She dragged her sneakers in the mulch to stop. She sat there, twisting the chains, looking down at her boots. "Grandma?" she asked softly. "Yes, Bean? Did I do a bad thing?" I walked around to face her. I crouched down so we were eye to eye. "Why would you think that?" "Because Mommy got in trouble," Layla said, "and the police took her. It's because I showed the video." My heart broke a little. Even after everything, she was still a child trying to make sense of the chaos. "Layla, look at me," I said. She raised her big brown eyes. "You didn't get Mommy in trouble," I said firmly. "Mommy got herself in trouble. She did bad things. She lied. You just turned on the light so the judge could see." "Like with monsters?" Layla asked. "When you turn on the light to make them go away?" "Exactly like with monsters," I smiled. "But why did you record it?" I asked gently. "You hid the phone for months. That's a long time to keep a secret." Layla let go of the chains. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small, folded piece of paper. It was worn at the edges. "Because of what you told me," she said. "What I told you." "Last Christmas," Layla said, "when you gave me the phone and the socks, you whispered something." I racked my brain. I remembered being scared. I remembered hugging her. "You said, 'The truth is a shield, Layla. If you hold it up, it will protect you.'" Tears pricked my eyes. I had forgotten those exact words. But she hadn't. She had held on to them like a lifeline in a drowning sea. "So I made a shield," Layla said simply, "and I kept it under my mattress, just in case." I pulled her into a hug. I squeezed her so tight I thought I might burst. She wasn't just smart. She was a warrior. "You used it perfectly, Bean," I whispered into her hair. It was the best shield I've ever seen. We stayed there until the streetlights flickered on, just a grandmother and her granddaughter swinging in the twilight, safe and sound. That evening, the house smelled right again. It smelled of butter, sugar, and vanilla. I was in my kitchen wearing my favorite apron. Layla was standing on a stool next to me, covered in flour. Derek was sitting at the island, the safe island, not the one from the video, stealing chocolate chips from the bowl. "Dad, stop!" Layla laughed, swatting his hand away. "Those are for the cookies." "Quality control," Derek grinned, popping another one in his mouth. I watched them. The tension that had defined our lives for 6 months was gone. The silence was gone. The fear was gone. Derek looked up and caught me staring. "What?" he asked, smiling. "Nothing," I said, blinking back happy tears. "Just looking." "You're doing it again," Derek teased. "The matriarch stare." "I earned it," I said. I pulled the tray of cookies out of the oven. The heat hit my face, warm and comforting. Mallory was in a cell. Brett was broke. And we were here. They had tried to break us. They had tried to steal our joy. But they forgot one thing. You can steal money. You can steal a house. But you can't steal the bond of a family that fights for each other. Layla grabbed a hot cookie, blowing on it frantically. "Hot, hot," she laughed. I laughed with her. It was the best sound in the world. Thank you so much for watching till the end. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss the next one. Drop your country flag and location in the comments. I'd love to know where you're watching from. And if you're still not subscribed, seriously, what's stopping you? Your feedback means a lot and helps me improve every story.